Good morning, everybody. My name is MISHA MLADENOVIC. I'm the majority owner and president of M2E Consulting Engineers. M2E is a full-service engineering firm that serves the condominium space by providing engineering services in all areas of engineering. Full-service engineering firm is a fancy way of saying that we have all the disciplines in-house, which includes structural, civil, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, fire protection, as well as specialty engineering such as envelope engineering, threshold inspection, and so forth. We have been recognized as the foremost forensic engineering and consulting engineering firm in the Southeast for several years already. And it is my pleasure to co-host this particular seminar with Jason from Siegfried Rivera. Before we start, I would suggest for everybody first to understand of the rules, general rules of this particular webinar. At the bottom of your screens, there is two little clicks that you can see, or two little icons. One is called chat. Chat means that everybody in this particular webinar, which is all the participants and the panelists, will see that message. Chat should be reserved really for technical issues that you might encounter during the seminar itself. In other words, hey Misha, I can't hear you. Hey Jason, you disappeared. Hey Misha, the video is blurry, or something like that. On the other hand, you have another little icon called Q&A, and the format of this particular seminar is an open-ended one. Essentially, at the end of our presentation, we will welcome each and every one of you to give us what your aches are and what specific issues you would like us to discuss. We do not have a hard stop at the end of this. We will try to keep our presentation to 45 minutes, allowing not less than 15 minutes for all the Q&A. But of course, if there is a bunch of other interesting questions that we might have, we'll be more than glad to answer them. With that, I leave the mic to my friend and associate, Jason de CRUZ from Siegfried Rivera.
Thank you, Misha. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I do want to make one comment about Misha's appearance. It looks like he's maintained himself very well for the past 7 weeks. I've been cutting my hair every week for the past 6 or 7 weeks, so I apologize if it looks kind of crazy. I've done my best this morning, but I see that. But in any event, let me tell you a little bit about myself. If some of you don't know who I am, I'm Jason Rogers de CRUZ. I'm a shareholder with the law firm of Siegfried Rivera. Siegfried Rivera is a condominium construction real estate law firm. We've been around for the past 40 years. We have excellent condo practice, excellent construction practice. I'm also chair of the construction defect trial practice group at the firm. So with regard to all the construction defect cases, whether you have a roofing issue or structural issues or Chinese drywall or fire sprinklers, I pretty much am involved in all of those cases with the other lawyers. I have worked with Misha for many years, and he is an excellent engineer, very pragmatic, very methodical, excellent understanding of building systems, no matter what the systems are. And so in putting this together, we thought about, some of these issues that you all are being confronted with, especially when, maybe finances aren't so great right now. Everybody's, at full occupancy at these condominiums or at your condominiums. And so the focus is what needs to be done, what's essential, what's critical. And so Misha's going to run through the technical aspects of your building systems. And so for the first part of the presentation, he's going to go through those aspects. And the latter part of the presentation, I'm going to go through the legal implications. So thank you again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Misha.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for the compliments. Without bouncing the ball back between the two of us, I just would like to stick to the fact that our two firms have secured the two largest condo awards in last year. So I think that the combination of Jason and his firm and our engineering firm has proven back and forth and on many occasions to be the winning combination. Without any further delay, let's start with what you actually came rather than listening to Jason and me saying to each other how great we are. The learning objectives of this course are really in this new era that we're in, where the occupancy of the condominiums is at its highest because nobody can leave home, or a lot of people cannot leave home. What is it that can be done for your particular condominium in order to have the enjoyment of your home and at the same time to have the opportunity to budget properly for what is a normal maintenance of your condominium? I will address, as well as Jason, why it is so essential to have a preventive property maintenance plan. Because at the end of the day, it is the things that don't ache us a lot, but that potentially are very big problems that may become biggest issue in the future. The format of this particular webinar, as I mentioned it previously, is to give you the information and share it with you, but at the same time, it is an interactive course, whereas we welcome any input that you might have, such as what specific question you may have that relates to this course. Next slide, please. The benefits of property maintenance. These are essentially the modules, and hopefully the next scrolling is going to be a little better. We're going to talk about the benefits of the property maintenance. Everybody on this particular call knows why that is important overall. But what we will talk about is specifically about what types of maintenance exist on a typical condominium, as well as within those type of maintenance, which are the more important or the one that are typically omitted or put to the side. We will be talking about creating a property maintenance, preventive maintenance plan. Preventive maintenance plan, we're going to call it the PMP, is something that this particular seminar will address in detail, and at the same time give you basic tools of how to make one. We will give you some basic indication as to where to start, because it might sound at some point overly complex or too much things at the same time. And we will give you kind of a cheat sheet on how to, once you create it, keep it updated and pertinent to what is actually happening in your asset. We will also talk about the most neglected areas, because not really in your face during this particular seminar, and how to evade the shortcomings that may come from neglecting certain areas of your condominium. Next slide, please. The first type of maintenance is routine maintenance. And we were going to talk about the benefits of the property maintenance first, because most of the property management companies are responsive to maintenance requests. It is because some of them are typical, such as routine maintenance, things that are really in front of your eyes. But there is certain part of the maintenance that are often neglected or put to the side. And let me be the first, like it says, to mention it. You will do it at your own risk. Putting yourself in the head of what is really happening in a building of any complexity. I'm going to use examples because engineers like to use things to simplify what we typically try to express in a complex matter. You can buy a gasket for a motor, and that costs a couple of dollars, or you can wait until the motor dies and either spend hundreds of dollars on repair or thousands of dollars on replacement. But if you don't know when the gasket should be replaced or where the gasket is, how would you know that the gasket is due to be replaced every Wednesday or every Thursday or once a month? So that's why a regular and structured maintenance can help you not only evade those shortcomings in the future, but it will prevent you from running constantly the entire building in an emergency mode. Essentially, rather than maintaining your building, you will be running from one emergency call to the other. The first type of maintenance, next slide please. The first type of maintenance is routine maintenance. Routine maintenance are the jobs that are readily observable, and this is the type of maintenance that is typically easy to observe and perform. Think about maintenance of your landscaping. In other words, you do daily, weekly, and monthly walks, and if there is trash, you pick it up. If there is a flower that is damaged, you will replace it or replant it. But this is something that is right in front of your face, and that routine type of maintenance is typically done fairly well because it is easy to observe, easy to perform, and typically not costly. The one that we're going to talk about today mainly is preventive maintenance. And it's the easiest one to neglect because it is not an emergency and it's not something that is in your face on a daily basis. Preventive maintenance is the maintenance that you don't want to do. Again, analogy. You really don't want to go to your car dealership every 3,000 or 5,000 miles to replace the oil. But your car dealer tells you that if you don't do that, then at mile 10,000 or 15,000, instead of paying $59.99 for your oil change, you're going to spend $30,000 for an entire engine that you need to replace. Which means that although you really don't like to do it, although you may not be really, incentivized to do it, otherwise than the dealer telling you, by the way, 100 miles till your next maintenance, says your intelligent car, or your dealer selling your car, it's time for your oil change. It's something that is not in your face. The car didn't stop, but you do it anyway, because it will elongate the life expectancy of your car and it will run the way that you expect it to do. So whether you change a simple air filter in the heat pump or HVAC, or maintain the oil in your car, it's the same thing. Because if you don't do it, you go to number 3, which is corrective maintenance. Corrective maintenance means something is already broken. And because corrective maintenance is based on failure, there is really no option not to correct it. The cooling tower has failed. The pumps have failed. And it's not an option to say, but we'll wait until September to replace it, right? We live in South Florida, imagine yourself without AC, or imagine yourself without hot water. Corrective maintenance is the maintenance that is guided by the failure and not by the planning. Finally, you have cosmetic maintenance, which is the pretty stuff around your property. Cosmetics maintenance may be not costly, such as here is a new flower bed, and can be quite expensive. It is repainting a building if you talk about that, but that part of cosmetic maintenance is part of number 5, which is next slide, please. Deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is the maintenance that you know you have to perform. However, you don't have the funds or availability of funds currently to do it. What are the pitfalls? Well, deferred maintenance cannot be forgotten maintenance. So if you say that you need to repaint a building every 5 to 7 years, depending on how close or how far from the water you are here in South Florida, comes year 12 and you didn't repaint your building, you will go into corrective maintenance. So if you made your plan for deferred maintenance that the paint has faded by year 3, 3.5, 4, 5, but has not failed, and you defer it for another 2 years, once those 2 years expire, the deferred maintenance need to become actual maintenance. So whether the boards have changed or whether the property management has changed, the deferred maintenance need to be kept fresh, and once planned, needs to be performed. We need to know, because of that deferred maintenance, as the boards and the management might change, need to be done in a easily readable and retrievable type of database, so that whomever handles the handover will be able at that point to transfer that data to the new board or to the new manager should one occur. You should also be in contact with your tenants or owners in the building, because the deferred maintenance, once performed, needs to be published to them. In other words, we made a plan to paint the building in 2020, and here we are, and in August of 2020, we're going to start it. That way of maintaining we planned it, now it's happening, gives a sense of control that the management company has over the process, and then transfers that knowledge to the owners and tenants, who at that point both have the enjoyment of the building and have a sense of care. Next slide, please. Creative preventive maintenance plan. There is really three components of the whys. The benefits of having a preventive maintenance plan is detecting something before it breaks. So we go back to, again, the oil or the gasket. Very simply put, obviously the cost of the gasket is orders of magnitude less than the cost of the motor, and an oil change is orders of magnitude less than the cost of a car. So how do you do that? How do you detect and how do you address stuff before stuff breaks? First, you need to be able to anticipate what is going to happen. So you anticipate them because you know that ultimately there is an expected life expectancy for the actual component. So if the life expectancy is 5 years and you're at year number 3, you should plan that something bad will happen in the next 2 years. You need to anticipate. If you maintain it properly, you will actually extend the life expectancy, so that the properly managed and maintained element will actually be able to elongate its life expectancy. So that's why this particular this particular preventive maintenance plan is of crucial importance. You extend the lifespan, you prevent critical failure, and also you can control the budgeting so that small amounts of money over time prevent you to have large expenses once a critical failure occurs. And in the process, the enjoyment of happy and properly addressed and informed tenants and owners will also validate why this is such an important thing. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, where do I start, right? This sounds very much overwhelming. Here you are, MISHA, Mr. Smart, telling us that we should do it. It's super important. It's going to save us money. It's going to elongate the life expectancy. But where do I start? How do I do this? Well, the good news is, number one, you're not alone. So what does that mean? As a condominium association, boards have selected a capable and experienced property management firm. And that makes sense because today's buildings are more complex, more technologically imbibed, more challenging to maintain than they used to be only 20 years ago. So now you have an actual property management company with a property manager and hopefully a building engineer watching over the building that is your home. They in turn, together with your help, select third-party professionals such as attorneys and engineers that will counsel them on how to do certain thing that is out of their area of expertise. We engineers actually know what is the life expectancy of most of the components, actually all of the components of your building. We can counsel your property manager onto what are specific elements of the building that you have that are more likely to fail based on our experience and exposure in the marketplace. We consult with hundreds of condominiums. which means thousands of units, and we have experienced tens and hundreds of thousands of modes of failure. We can help, together with your property management company, essentially reverse engineer the bad stuff so that that bad stuff doesn't happen to you. So you will be able, through a preventive maintenance plan, to know what needs to be properly maintained with the help of professionals. You will know when, because you will know the life expectancy and the maintenance required in order to reach that life expectancy. And you will also know how much. The gasket cost, the oil change cost, rather than the car cost and the pump cost. Next slide, please. So, number 2, stop the problem before they start. A stitching type saves knives, has band perfection, and simply put, this particular issue or basis is quite simple. You can't fix what you don't know. You can't maintain what you don't know. So, under 1, you selected the capable and experienced property management company. Together with engineers and other consultants, they defined the what's, the when's, and the how much. But now, you need to populate the universe of all of the things in your building that need to be maintained. So number 1, the building needs to be walked, photographed, and a database needs to be generated of all of the elements that are maintainable and that need to be maintained over time. Again, you can't fix what you don't know. 2, you will create a database for all of these items, and it should be updated, because as you visit those items, you will say that motor number 3 was overhauled on March 3rd. The next service should be May of next year. So that dynamic database that is regularly updated becomes the platform from which you work. So you have the elements, you have the updating, and you have also what needs to be done when. In the future, anticipating. So that when the alarm comes in May of next year, you will know that that pump needs to be serviced. And there is no ifs, ands, or buts. If you need to do it, because a preventive maintenance plan is only as good as you use it. This approach is also important, as we mentioned before, because that database is now transferable. Board number 1 becomes board number 2. But the items to be maintained don't change because your building didn't change. If this preventive maintenance plan was established on the board number 1, and items 1, 3, 17 were taken care during the period that they were in control, item 2, 4, and 44 need to be taken care of during the next period of where the control is given to the next board. And this pertains also in case that you change physical property manager. Even under the same property management company, you may have another manager, but the database remains stable and transferable. Next slide, please. The schedule that is made within this particular database needs to be followed strictly. If you define the what's, the when's, and the how much, and if you generate the database, but then comes May of next year, you choose not to do what the database tells you, you can pretty much take all of that preventive maintenance plan, crumble it, and put it to the trash can. You just wasted resource, time, and money into creating something that nobody's using. If you don't use it, it's worthless. Which brings me to the overall importance and how does one get vetted and vested into this particular endeavor. Why is it really important? It is important because buildings today are more complex than they used to be before. The actual life expectancy of certain components of building has shrunk. Those who, like me, have gray or no hair, unlike my young colleague, and remember when elevators had dry contact relays to control them rather than electronics, can remember that replacing a relay was a couple of bucks, and when the contacts didn't work, you can WD-40 it. However, today, with a PC board and integral electronics that controls elevators, a strong storm or electrical surge will completely fry your elevator controls. But your elevator can stop more softer, he can talk to you, he can choose your floor, and therefore, it's not something that we can go back to. The point being, more sophistication and technology in buildings today actually engender a different type of maintenance. So this particular preventive maintenance has even more importance in today's era. Next slide, please. Once the importance is clear in everybody's mind, and I think that's something that needs to be embraced both by boards and management companies. The management company should be, by definition, sold on this one because it really makes their life easier. Can we all agree that you look better to your clientele when your building runs smoothly and when you anticipate costs rather than pumping at them emergencies once that something breaks? At minimum, you should inform them of the consequences of their choice of not to do a preventive plan. Because once that the importance is really embraced by the management company and subsequently by the board, they can keep the benefits in mind of what this means. The benefits on the very real platform of cost is that, yes, there will be cost ongoing over time in possibly budgeting for more time in actually walking the building, because you need to spend time in order to both populate and then update the famous database that we just talked about. But also, that will allow you, that added cost as you generate and maintain it, will allow you to actually budget it over time. You will budget for that manpower, you will budget for the gasket, you will budget for the oil change. There will not be a surprise screeching halt or that pump or that car occurring. You will not be, you, the board, and you, the management company, will not be in the business of managing only emergencies. So that, through careful and regular maintenance, will give a more enjoyable environment for everybody in your building, and frankly, will make everybody look good. Next slide, please. So I already said previously, if you don't want to follow it, then just don't make it. Preventive maintenance plan is only as good as it gets used. You need to believe in it. You need to drink the Kool-Aid of preventive maintenance if you want to make it work. But frankly, it's so logical that once explained the way that we're trying to portray it now, it's kind of easy to have a buy-in. So because it is only valuable if it's used regularly, be sure that your database doesn't become stale. And be sure to remind everybody on a regular basis of why this is important, whether it is your staff or your owners, tenants, through their board. Because you may encounter situations where the entire preventive maintenance is brought into question. Why are we doing this? This is an ongoing cost. Everything is fine. Well, keep reminding everybody of the importance and benefits of having an articulate property maintenance, preventive maintenance plan. So where do we start, right? In its general list. We generated a cheat sheet of something that are kind of intuitively clear, but it's not bad to have it in the forefront of your mind. And obviously this is just a broad brush, but an essential broad brush. So your list should not be without this, which doesn't mean that this is your list. This should be on your list plus everything that you would like to add. So for the general building and interiors, you have the conditions of general services. Think floors, ceilings, walls, general service. You would look for leaks and water damage on the inside. Presence of moisture is a no-no. South Florida, as probably you all know, is one of the most aggressive environments for structures. What does that really mean? Well, we have water below us because aquifer, right? Try to dig more than 6-7 feet, or think about how the horror stories of the so-called underground parking in South Florida ended up. So water is below us. Water is also on our east side because ocean, and it's also on our west side, depending where you live. It could be the Bay or it could be the Everglades. And also the water is on top of us because torrential rains are just, what, a month or so away. Why is that important? Well, we live in a salty, humid, wet environment, which makes it the worst possible environment for construction materials. Because water laden with salt will eventually wash off your buildings. It will literally eat at your paint and stucco because the UV rays of the sun literally eat your paint. Once the paint is eaten and powdery and chalky, it will then proceed to crack your stucco, which will allow the water from your rainy season and the hurricane to reach the porous elements behind the stucco. Think about unsealed caulking joints. Think about just porous concrete block. And once it's there, it will find its way into your home. So look for leaks and water intrusion before a bit of caulking is causing you to replace an entire wood floor. Check the door locks. The stairs and railings need to be secured and that the exits are clearly marked. Test the different systems that need to exist on the interior side, such as smoke evacuation, and also look out for tripping hazards. There should be a general look for cleanliness so that all the corridors are free of debris, and also conduct routine pest and other maintenance. Next one, please. Next. On the exterior, back to my whole story about water everywhere. Glazing, which is a fancy way of saying windows, sliding glass doors, and fixed windows, need to be maintained on a regular basis. Caulking fails over time because, again, sun and salt will eat at them. So when your building is repainted, those need to be addressed as well. Again, look at the exterior and check the condition of both the perimeter and the windows and the stucco and the envelope. Because, back to the gasket and the motor and the oil and the car, a bit of caulking on 10-20 linear feet of cracks in the stucco can cost, together with labor, a couple of $100. An open crack in stucco with water penetration is thousands of dollars. Think about misalignment of pipes. For example, as you know, in a high-rise, pipes are stacked, but not always ideally. So as the building expands and settles, those pipes come out of alignment. If you see it when it does this, and you actually come and realign it, it's the cost of a plumber coming and reattaching it. By the time it does this, and hundreds and thousands of gallons of water come gushing through your building, you're talking about several floors being inundated. Which one of these cases would you like to be in? Look at the roof, clean any trash and debris, and also look at the sidewalks, which would be possible tripping hazards. And finally, look at wood elements where presence of rot or splitting might be a telltale sign of either past or age. Next one, please. The building systems. The building systems themselves are not always as easily observable as one would think. However, basic things are. Think about plumbing. If you think about water heaters being an element where a lot of leaks occur, water heaters are either close to or within the same closet as your AC units. Well, every time that a filter is maintained, one will want to look at the condition of the piping as well. In general, check for sign of leaks of the plumbing system, of failing joints, because a couple of drops in the joints takes, again, a couple of hours of labor to fix. A burst pipe needs a whole lot more work and generates a whole lot more of damage. In the electrical field, you will want to look for a loose electrical wiring, sign of either crisping or smell, or also you may want to use thermal guns in order to identify areas of elevated temperature within the electrical system, which is a telltale of possible future problems. Finally, inspect the elevators, and we'll get to that in a little more detail. There is an advantage in having maintenance contract with complex building systems, in as much that a third party is now made responsible to maintain them on a regular basis. And you may say, yeah, but that cost. Yes and no. Depending on the size of the building and the complexity of your system, it is definitely something that you should look at. If you have a high-rise where you may have at least one and sometimes multiple cooling towers, the maintenance of the cooling tower, rather than being just the chemical injection of the stuff that you need to put so that algae is not present, can become also the maintenance of the piping and the pumping that is associated with it, as well as other mechanical items, such as the fans and so forth. Now you have a unique entity responsible for the overall heart of your cooling system, and it may be beneficial and sometimes cost-effective. The same thing is for elevators. And for elevators, you may want to do something that we recommend to all our clients. Get a third-party elevator consultant to take a look at your elevator maintenance contracts. Why is that important? It is a science in itself. And we typically find that while you have a quite expensive elevator maintenance contract, there is not much that is really in it. And when something breaks, you pay again. So get a third-party consultant. We can help in selecting that. That would actually give you the health of your elevator maintenance contract and counsel you in how to get the best bang for the buck. Next one, please. The most neglected areas, the roofs. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, roofs are, as you know, not necessarily easy to inspect, particularly at noontime in South Florida. So how often do I go there? The answer is quite often, because if you think that because you have a 10, 15, 20 years, no dollar limit warranty, read the fine prints. It typically says that the building needs to be maintained and maintainable, so that if you didn't follow some of the guidelines that are given by your roofing maintenance or contractor, it will void your warranty. Buy a roof maintenance contract. Sometimes the original contractor will agree to do that. If not, you can buy it from any reputable roofing contractor in the area. They will come once a year and essentially re-endorse your warranty. They will make sure that the original installer and the manufacturer of the materials remain on the hook if there is some failure in the material of the installation. This is one that the excuse really does not make any sense, because there is no worse thing than an ongoing leak that could have been prevented and that was just not found until the entire roof underlayment is saturated. Now, instead of just addressing the issue of a certain patch, you have to consider replacing a significant portion of the roof. Hot water heaters, I already talked about it. It's already in the neighborhood of where your AC unit is. So by all means, take a look at those pipes at the same time. And they are typically the location when most of the pipe penetration in the condominium will occur. Balconies, well, in South Florida, when balconies are cantilevered, which is they're hanging like this from the building, this portion of the balcony is exposed to that salty, moisty air that we hate from three sides, and the salty, moisty air would find its way through the paint, through the stucco, reach the concrete, through the concrete, which is porous, surprise, will eventually reach the steel. Steel will corrode, steel will expand, steel will push the concrete away, and chunks of concrete will drop off your balcony edges. We all drove by certain condominiums where you can actually see the pieces of steel on the edges. That's too late. If you would have painted and maintained those as you should have not come to the point where you have to do costly concrete restoration. But by the time that it's concrete restoration time, it is both expensive for your wallet and as an experience for your tenants. Finally, light fixtures. It's a self-evident thing that because of liability and enjoyment of your owners and tenants, this is a simple one that you should maintain regularly. And the fact that it's easy particularly means that you should take care of it. Next one, please. Elevator maintenance, I spoke greatly about it. It's essentially the same repeat of what I just said. Be sure that your elevator maintenance contract actually makes sense and that you're not overpaying for something that is being under-delivered to you. Next one, please.
Okay.
So I'll pass the baton to my friend Jason.
Thank you, Misha. That was very informative. And as everyone heard, maintenance is extremely critical, must be performed. And I'm going to go through the legal implications of why maintenance is critical, the duties and obligations as well that a board of directors and the association has to its membership. In addition to, contractual obligations, there are statutory obligations, there are warranty obligation. Of course, you have the governing documents and you have all those obligations that you have under the governing documents, i.e. the Declaration of Condominium. So why don't we start with the statutory obligations? Next slide. So I don't know, I don't know if a lot of you or most of you, some of you have dealt with the turnover process of a new condominium. So new condominiums are interesting creatures. They're brand new buildings. Engineers such as MISHA will come in, they'll evaluate the structure, they'll do what's called a turnover report to determine whether or not there are construction deficiencies with the building, and they'll identify design issues, identify construction issues, and a lot of these issues are huge issues. I've handled over the past 16 years over 100 of these complex construction defect cases all over the state. So one thing that's critical, if you have a new condominium and you're in a lawsuit, more than likely you have filed a cause of action for statutory warranties. And so there are developer warranties, there are contractor and subcontractor warranties. And in addition to that, if you're suing a design professional, those design professionals are being sued for professional negligence. So why are these warranties so important, and why is it that maintenance is so critical? In the statute, it says that these warranties are conditioned upon routine maintenance being performed. So when I file suit on behalf of a condominium association, on the defense side, the first thing that they ask for, where are all your maintenance records? We want to see them. We want to see your vendor contracts. We want to see your roofing contracts. We want to see whether or not you've been maintaining the stucco. We want to know whether or not any unit owners have been complaining about water. What have you done with regard to the building envelope and addressing those concerns? And so we have to provide those maintenance records. So it's extremely important that routine maintenance be performed, because if you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, the last thing you want to deal with is a defendant, contractor, or subcontractor saying, hey, that's great. I may have owed you these statutory warranties, but you haven't maintained your property for the past 3 or 4 years. And so that $5 or $10 million claim, they'll attempt to break it down to a $200,000, $500,000 claim. So that's an extremely important reason to perform that routine maintenance. Another statutory obligation. Under Chapter 558, if you have a construction deficiency, you have to send what's called a notice of claim out to the recipient of the notice of claim, or the defendant. You have to send this notice of claim out before you file suit. And in the statute, it provides that the recipient can request documents of the claimant. So for example, an association has an issue with a roofer, and there are some roofing deficiencies. You hire MISHA. MISHA looks at the deficiencies. He figures out what the problems are, prepares a report. You then hire me. I send out a notice of claim to the roofing contractor. The roofing contractor receives it, conducts an inspection, and then sends a letter back to me and says, hey, we want to see your maintenance records. Under this statute, you are obligated to produce those records to that roofer in evaluating the claim. And the reason for that is the legislature wants us to try to resolve the claim pre-suit, and so that the parties are aware of the issues. And so it's critical that maintenance be performed and that you have those records that MISHA talked about in order to document that that maintenance has actually been performed. In short, it shows what's been done and what hasn't been done. So that's critical. So think about those statutory obligations. You know, we're just issue spotting here. Obviously, if you have very detailed legal analysis or any legal questions, you come to a lawyer and they'll lead you through that. As well as engineering questions, you go to an engineer such as MISHA and they'll lead you through that as well. Next obligation. Let's go to the next slide. So contractual obligations. So with most of the projects that I deal with, I do a lot of contract work of drafting contracts for huge remediation projects. So for example, there's a new roof that needs to be installed. A client will come to me and say, Jason, MISHA has already prepared the plan specifications for this new roofing job. It's a complete restoration, a rip off of the roof. We need you to prepare the contract, look at the contract documents and prepare that. What you need to focus in on is with regard to your contracts, whether it be vendor contracts or remediation contracts, what does it say about routine maintenance? Okay, so again, read those contractual obligations and understand those contractual obligations, because sometimes those warranties are conditioned upon routine maintenance. So a lot of clients don't think about those things. They don't think, well, wait a minute, you know, I did this stucco job and there's a warranty as part of it, but oh wait, the stucco subcontractor also has this provision that says, in order for me to honor this warranty, we have to see that maintenance has been performed. So pay attention to that, because ultimately, if those warranty obligations or if those maintenance obligations are not addressed, they may attempt to void the warranty. Next slide. Written warranties. So we talked about contractual obligations. Let's talk about written warranties. And so a written warranty is basically a sheet of paper. It's derived from the contract. I know most of you have probably seen it. It's a one-page standalone document that says, from the roofer, for example, this is the warranty that I'm giving you. And it's conditioned on the following things, such as routine maintenance. What's an example of routine maintenance? So a lot of these warranties have exclusions, manufacturers more so than, say, a subcontractor. So some of the exclusions will say the roof must be kept clean of debris. You cannot rock on the roof. You make sure that the drains are not clogged. Clean the roof. Make sure there's no ponding. And so these are critical components that must be followed. And it's very simple. If you listen to what MISHA has had to say, you go up, you inspect the roof, you figure out whether or not the roof is ponding, you clean the roof. I mean, these are things that must be done. These are routine maintenance. So in the event that you do have a warranty claim, and they ask you for those maintenance records, you could say, yes, we've done all of that. The roof isn't ponding. We don't allow it to pond. Number two, we clean the roof. It's free of leaves and debris. Number three, we don't allow unit owners up on the roof because that's another exclusion. Number four, we don't walk on the roof unless you have those roofing pads that are out there and established for walking. So pay attention to those warranties as well, because if you don't perform routine maintenance, again, they'll attempt to avoid those warranties. Manufacturer's warranties. Those are the most interesting warranties. And, you know, MISHA talked about a 20-year no dollar limit warranty for workmanship and materials supplied, for example, for a roofing system. I have sued many a manufacturer, and I always have to deal with the exclusions. And they write up so many exclusions at the end of the day, they don't want to honor the warranty, period, end of story. So it's conditioned on routine maintenance, it's conditioned on all these other factors. Make sure you read it, read those exclusions. If you don't understand it, come to a lawyer and have them explain it to you, because you don't want to void the warranty. You don't want to have them show up and say, you know what, you've got a 20-year no dollar limit warranty. You're in the third year of the warranty and you've completely screwed it up. You haven't maintained it. We're not going to honor it. Another thing to pay attention with the manufacturer's warranties is the notification requirements. So what does that mean? If you have a leak, you can't sit on it. You've got to notify them immediately. There are certain time periods in which you must notify a manufacturer. Otherwise, again, they'll move to exclude it. They just make up these arbitrary rules, but those are the rules. Those are the terms of the warranty. And in short, it is an agreement with you and the manufacturer, and they expect that we follow the agreement no matter how burdensome it is. So pay very close attention to that. Next slide. Governing documents. Everybody knows about the governing documents. Everybody knows about the Declaration of Condominium and the duty to maintain the common elements. So what are the common elements generally? You have stucco, you've got the building envelope features such as the paint, the waterproofing, the structural components, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing components. It is absolutely critical that you maintain these components. Why? Not only to preserve the life of the building, but if something goes wrong, say for example, with the roofing system and it springs a leak and you don't address it and that leak gets bigger, then it'll affect the units below, which cause damage to the interior of the unit. So all of a sudden you have a unit owner that says, hey, wait a minute, I'm not responsible for maintaining the common elements. The association is responsible for maintaining the common elements. And why aren't they doing it? So you have all these unit owners now during COVID who are at their homes. We have buildings that are at full occupancy. They're very sensitive to what's going on with the building, whether it's a mechanical component or plumbing, whether it's a roofing component, whether it's water intrusion coming in from the exterior. They're paying attention to these things. And so if you don't address it, there's going to be a lawsuit by the unit owners. And the litigation is very complex. They will be seeking injunctive relief, which basically means, association, I cannot touch the common elements. It's your property. You need to address it and keep the water from coming into my unit. And then in addition to that, they will be seeking damages, which will be additional damages to their interior. They'll seek attorney's fees and costs as part of it, pursuant to the declaration and pursuant to the statute. So, you know, there are many horror stories with what can go wrong, especially with plumbing components inside a building. A plumbing component springs a leak. Maybe you haven't done the maintenance that you needed to perform, and before you know it, you have a waterfall going from floor to floor to floor to floor. That gets extremely expensive to deal with. So, in short, pay attention to these items. If there are financial concerns, because maybe the money isn't flowing in as quickly as it was before COVID, I mean, there are options. There are lenders that can lend you the money, you know, lines of credit. Certainly speak to your lawyers about that, because it's absolutely critical to take care of these issues now, because if you don't take care of them now, they're going to grow exponentially. And instead of a $50,000 issue, now you have a $500,000 issue. Next slide. So let's talk about the takeaways. We know that you're not professional engineers out there, such as MISHA, and you don't have, you know, 40 years of experience with building systems. I think we want you to issue spot and focus on the points and think to yourself, wait a minute, you know, I had that presentation with MISHA and Jason, and they talked about this one issue. I need to focus in on it. I'm going to give MISHA a call. I'm going to give Jason a call and focus in on it. So MISHA, why don't you go through the first part of the takeaways, and I'll go through the latter part of the takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. The conclusion is simple. You should continue doing what you're doing well, which is the typical routine maintenance that everybody does. Regular intervals, daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally, annually. That routine maintenance is something that you do in normal course of business, and you typically do it well, because obvious. The preventive maintenance has the goal to identify stuff before it breaks and establish a preventive maintenance program that embodies planning for the future, budgeting for the future after you identified what needs to be maintained for a longer period of time. If you do that, the repair should be minimal, budgeted, and regular if you properly create and implement a PMP and follow it through the years. It is also very important because while you generate it, you will have also a platform that you will be able to transfer from board to board, from property manager to property managers, and in the process, extend the useful life of your building components.
Thank you, MISHA. So with regard to the legal implications, don't gloss over those contracts, don't gloss over the statute, the warranty obligations, and obviously your governing documents. These issues are very complex. There's a lot of common sense that is applied to it, but ultimately they are very technical issues. So, you know, I always tell every single client, I know MISHA tells every single client as well, hire the right people that are experienced for the job and seek the expert assistance from those engineers and from those lawyers. So thank you for joining us here today. We have, if you can see on the screen, if you need continuing education credit, please reach out to Nina at m2e.com. And next slide, if you need to reach out to MISHA, myself, this is our information, MISHA at m2e.com and JRogers at siegfriedrivera.com. I see we have a few questions. MISHA,
yes.
Do you want to post the questions?
Yes, I'll try. I'll give it a shot, starting with the first one. Thank you very much for participating. How often should one inspect the hot water heaters? The hot water heaters should be inspected not less than at the intervals to change filters for the AC units, which is not less than once monthly. I know it may sound a lot, but because it is a visual inspection and can give you a heads up on potential leaks, it should be done not less than once a month. Another question was, could we download or print a copy of the presentation? This entire webinar is being taped, and all of the people who signed up for the webinar will get a link to the video of the entire webinar, and therein contained also the presentation.
Yep.
Do we have any other question in the Q&A portion? As you will have our emails as part of the presentation, I always say in this particular type of webinars, there is always the moment that you leave the meeting, somebody will go, ah, I wish I only would have asked this. Well, both Jason and myself are available. By all means, do not be shy. Please reach out to us. I wanted to thank you personally for attending our webinar, and to also announce that Jason and I are putting together an actual COVID-specific webinar that will be talking about procedures within a condominium in the new normal that this particular problem has brought onto all of us. Please be alert to your emails as we are putting it together. It should be out in not more than 2 weeks from now, and it will be topic specific to what the condominium should and should not do in this new area of partial opening that we are going to experience shortly.
Yes, I see, Misha, that someone in the chat has, it seems like it's a question, anything about importance of reserve studies? So reserve studies are obviously very important. You know, MISHA gets involved in preparing a lot of these reserve studies, looking at the mechanical, electrical, plumbing components, structural components, roofing components, and determining, you know, the life expectancy of those particular components and, you know, what needs to be performed in order to properly reserve the funds necessary to maintain those components. So, you know, that is obviously extremely important. That's something that needs to be considered. Every single condominium association should be performing reserve studies, and it's important to follow those reserve studies because those are the documents and the guidelines that set forth by your experts in assisting you to put those monies aside. Right, Misha?
Correct, and essentially there is the idea is that you could essentially have a reserve study. There is 2 types of reserve studies because 2 types of formal reserves. For those who know on the phone call, sorry to be repetitive, but there is one form of segregation where you actually say, this is the amount for the roof and you can't touch that money to do anything else. And there is this much for the HVAC and it's only for the HVAC and you cannot touch it. And there is another approach, which is the predominant approach now, which is this is the pile of money that we're going to use for reserve for all of the elements of the building, including roof, HVAC, X, Y, and Z. That allows you the flexibility to attend to the item that is the first one to fail without having to change the format of the reserves as you go through it. The key in this is that when you get somebody to do your reserve studies, I can't stress this enough, you don't get somebody who looks at statistics and has a table of values from which he plugs out stuff and for a very diminished fee gives you a reserve study 15 minutes after you retain him because it's something that he already has paginated. The only proper way to do it is to actually go to your site, become familiar with the specific elements of your building so that the reserve study reflects the expected life expectancy of the elements specific to your building, and that will take in account the location of the building, the age of the building, the age of the components, and the history that we know of certain components. Again, remember, we are exposed to failure and failure analysis in multiple building elements, and we would know what the real life expectancy is as opposed to the one that is advertised by the manufacturers. We have an attendee question about, is there a software solution to develop and track a preventive maintenance program? Yes, there is. We'll gladly chat about that. There is multiple platform and you can make it as simple or as complicated as one would want. Essentially, it is a database software that would allow for you to enter the data in, and that will send you alarms as they occur. If you email us, we'll be able to send you a link to a couple of those packages that are commercially available. Anybody else? Well, if nobody else has anything, for me at least, I wanted to thank you again for participating. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks at our next seminar. Thank you again for your participation and your questions. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.